All right, let's get into this chapter 2. Of course, we're talking about Nebuchadnezzar. He is the king of Babylon. And I would like to start off by reading verses 1 through 11. And I'm going to read that. And then I would like to discuss those verses briefly. And this class is going to finish at 7:45. And I would like to at least get through verse 45. Okay, so there's a lot in this, but I'm going to try to keep my eye on the clock, and I want to spend a lot of our time at the end of the chapter, towards the end of the chapter, but there is quite a bit in the beginning of the chapter I want to touch on a little bit. But I'm just going to start. I'm going to read the first 11 verses, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some of that. So please turn with me to chapter 2, and I'm going to read verses 1 through 11. In the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Then the king commanded that the magicians, the enchanters, and the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king. And the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, The word from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. But if you show the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, show me the dream and its interpretation. They answered a second time and said, Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show him its interpretation. The king answered and said, I know with certainty that you are trying to gain time, because you see that the word from me is firm. If you do not make the dream known to me, there is but one sentence for you. You have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the times change. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me its interpretation. The Chaldeans answered the king and said, There is not a man on earth who can meet the king's demand, for no great and powerful king has asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or Chaldean. The thing that the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. Can you imagine being asked that question? Can you imagine being asked to interpret a dream, not only being asked to interpret the dream, but tell me what the dream was and then tell me what the interpretation is? I had a dream last night. I did. I don't even remember what my dream was. That's true. I woke up this morning and I remembered that I had a dream and I couldn't even remember what it was. It's not strange, actually, for God to speak to men in dreams. And I do want to just look at a couple things. And we don't have to turn there. But in Genesis chapter 20, verses 1 through 7, there was the account of Abimelech. And Abraham and Abimelech, if you remember this account, Abraham wanted, he was going to have, he was passing his wife off to Abimelech as his sister. He was saying that his wife was his sister, and he gave him to Abimelech. And Abimelech basically took Abraham's wife in as if he was going to have her with him. And he had a dream at night, and God spoke to him and said, do not do this thing. And he didn't, okay? And he went to Abraham the next morning, and he was like, why did you do this thing to me? And he was like, well, she actually is my sister. She's my father's daughter from another mother, kind of thing, right? Then there was Jacob's dream. Jeff Smelter was here last week, and he talked to us about this dream where he was dreaming of the angels going up and down the ladder, and there was a dream that interpreted some things. And then there was Joseph's dream. Do you remember Joseph had a couple dreams with his brothers, and God spoke to him through these dreams? It's not uncommon for dreams to be had to men, and they mean something. Usually, though, it was a dream that the interpretation was given and someone knew what it was. But can you imagine saying, I had a dream and I need you to tell me what the dream was, and I need you to tell me what the answer is. Is it entirely impossible for me to know something about a person that I don't know? Like this gentleman right here, Clint, came in tonight, and he's from Knoxville. And I don't know this, but I'm guessing that he is a Tennessee Volunteer fan. Okay? You didn't tell me that. You just told me you were from Knoxville. But you're a volunteer, right? Am I some kind of a mind reader? No, I've just been around the world enough to know that that's might be what you are. But I'm not a magician, I'm not a Chaldean, I'm not an enchanter, but I know these things. But how would I have known that had you not told me that you were from Knoxville? I wouldn't have known that, because you're not even wearing a orange shirt. Yeah, Adam wears an orange shirt sometimes. And if you haven't met Adam yet, he's your brother over there. It's not uncommon that we can know something about people without knowing who they are. And in today's society, in today's world, with our modern AI technology and all this kind of stuff, maybe we can get some of this predictive things going on and whatnot. But can you imagine what was going on here? That's crazy. All right, looking at the clock. I do think it's important to see, though, that in this, they do say, if you guys haven't figured it out yet, what did they say there? And I think it's verse 11. The thing that the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it to the king except the gods whose dwelling is not with the flesh. Even they recognize that this is something that we can't do. Let's read verses 12 through 13. Because of this, the king was angry and very furious and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. So the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be killed. And they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. So remember, Daniel is one of the wise men. He's one of these guys that is part of the king's court. And now he's on the list of men that's going to be killed. Verse 14. Then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He declared to Arioch, the king's captain, "Why is the decree of the king so urgent?" Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel, and Daniel went in and requested the king to appoint him a time that he might show the interpretation to the king. So what is Daniel doing here in verses 14 through 16? Can you see what is Daniel?
He's interceding.
What did you say?
He's interceding. He's kind of stepping between the king and the wise men.
And he's interceding. You almost like he's bargaining for time, but he's asking, why is it so urgent? So let's move on then to verse 17 through 18. Then Daniel went to his house, and he made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. And just notice this, that he's talking to who? His three friends, but who did he call them?
Their God names.
God's names. Because next week when we're in chapter 3, just notice next week we're going to be calling these guys their other names. But this week we're calling them the names that God gave them. Just pay attention to that. This week we're calling them Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. And he told them to seek mercy from God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men at Babylon. So Daniel understands the predicament they're in, and he asks his three friends to seek counsel with God and understand what's going on, because he understands what Nebuchadnezzar has said is going to happen. And then this next part, verses 19 through 23, I think it's very beautiful language that he's getting ready to see here that's recorded. And Cindy had said some things last week of that reminds us that Daniel is saying who is in charge. It's reminding us that God is the one who's in charge here. And it's reminding us that even though Daniel is basically a prisoner, even though he's in the king's court, and Nebuchadnezzar is the king, but we see here that God is the one who's in charge of the things that's going on. Can someone read for me verses 19 through 23? Go ahead, Dave.
And the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we ask of you. For you have made known to us the king's matter.
So Daniel is faced with the predicament of being torn limb from limb, and yet he is saying things like, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He's not covering himself with ash and sackcloth and saying how horrible of a situation I'm in. He's saying, Blessed be the name of God. He changes times and season. He removes kings and sets up kings. I just think it's wonderful to see the language that he's using in such a time of despair. Nick?
It reminds me a lot of David and Goliath, where there's this task that everyone's afraid to do and facing death if they do it. And then David shows up and he trusts in God and says, Of course I can do this if God is with me.
Right.
And they're sort of saying the same thing. It's like, this task isn't difficult if God is with you.
Exactly. It's just really pretty. All right, let's move forward then into verses 24 through 25. Therefore, Daniel went into Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went in and said thus to him, Do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring him in before the king, and I will show the king the interpretation. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus to him, I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation. It's just interesting to see that a man, an exile from Judah, those are almost like curse words, I would think. Because before they were talking about the enchanters, the sorcerers, the Chaldeans, and the wise men. I would think those are like, whoa. And now we got this exile from Judah. I don't know. That's just what it sounds like to me. And he's the guy that has this interpretation. Does anybody else think that? It's what it reads like to me. So that was verse 25. Let's go to verse 26. Then the king declared to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar. So now the king remembers that his name's not Daniel, his name is Belteshazzar. Because remember, the king changed his name to Belteshazzar. Are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? And Daniel answered the king and said, no wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked. The guy who has his life in his hands, who the king has said that I can tear you limb from limb, has just said, do you have the interpretation? And Daniel says, nope, I don't. No man does. And he says, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head as you lay in bed are these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed came thoughts of what would be after this, and he who reveals mysteries made known to you what is to be. But as for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation may be known to the king, and that you may be known the thoughts of your mind. You saw, O king. We just read that verse 28, sorry. We'll come back to this phrase in a little bit. It's kind of an important phrase. We'll come back to that in a little bit. Just remember that phrase that we read in verse 28. Verse 31, where it says, you saw, O king, and behold, a great image. Tyler sent me this image. Isn't that nice? You saw, O king, and behold, a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold, all together were broken in pieces, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. What's the big deal of that dream?
He's foretelling the future. She's going to explain a little bit to him, but we kind of know from how history proceeds after this kingdom what he's talking about.
Yeah, so we're getting ready to read the interpretation. But when you just look at the picture, I mean, I think we have the benefit of hindsight sitting here in this room, right? Do you ever have weird dreams like this? Wouldn't it be nice if somebody could interpret them for you? I think it would be nice. I mean, sometimes Tracy tries to interpret them for me, but... Does anybody want to spoil it yet? Or I'll just go ahead and read the interpretation first, and then I'll spoil it. But this verse 35, before I spoil it, verse 35, just go back to read verse 35. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze. So we're going back from top to bottom now. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold, all together were broken in pieces and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone was struck the image. The stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. If you ever watch any of these Marvel movies, and there's one of them where all the characters just kind of start crumbling and then they all vanish away in the dust. I don't even remember what they called that, but they all just vanished away. But that kind of makes me think of that, like this thing hit them and they were gone like the wind. But it once was this mighty thing, and then it's gone. All right, let's read the interpretation. Verse 36. This was the dream. Now, we tell you, the king, its interpretation. You, O king, the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power and the might and the glory, and into whose hand he has given, wherever they dwell, the children of man, the beasts of the field, and the birds of heaven, making you rule over them. You are the head of gold. Another kingdom inferior to you shall arise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks into pieces and shatters all things. And like that iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these. And as you saw, the feet and the toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be divided kingdom, but some of the firmness of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with the soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly bitter. And you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in those days of the kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and break them to end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that a stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. A great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. This is Babylon. That's the head of gold. The head of gold was Babylon. The next kingdom was the Persian Empire. The shoulders. Persian Empire. The next kingdom was Greece, Alexander's great empire. The next kingdom was the Roman Empire. Do you get that? Does anybody have any questions about what these kingdoms are? You guys are all looking at me like I'm crazy. Either I'm up here just saying crazy stuff, or you're just like, I already know all this. Why are you talking about it?
Sure, it's how Nebuchadnezzar probably felt at the beginning too. We were talking about empires that had not yet existed for him, and he is at the height of everything. I mean, just look in verse 36 how Daniel even describes him. Nebuchadnezzar's really got it going for him, and it's because God has given him such power and authority. So to be all excited that someone can finally interpret your dream, and the interpretation is your own destruction, I'm sure that would be at minimal confusion and at the maximum just treason.
Yep. So let's just finish what he did, and then I want to talk about what it really is. Because I think it's more important to know what it really is. But it really is what he believed it was. But I want to talk more about what it is for us too. So let's go to verse 46. Because what you just said is right, Ryan. But what did King Nebuchadnezzar think about it? Verse 46. Why don't you read that for us, if you don't mind? 46 through the end of the chapter.
Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and paid homage to Daniel, and commanded that an offering and incense be offered up for him. The king answered and said to Daniel, "Truly your God is God of gods, and Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery." Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief prefect over the wise men of Babylon. Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel remained at the king's court.
So Nebuchadnezzar accepted this interpretation. You know, he wasn't upset by it, and he was like, this is great. And he paid homage, and he promoted Daniel and his friends, gave them gifts. So he accepted all that. But this, we're getting ready, in the next quarter, we're getting ready to talk about shadows of Christ. And can you see shadows of Christ in this? Have you guys figured that part of it out yet since we've been reading this? This is the gospel of Christ, with this image that we're talking about. What we see here, what do you think this is right here? Rob?
It's the rock. Matthew 16, verses 18 and 19, right around there.
Yeah.
Jesus tells Peter, upon this rock I will build my church. He's talking about himself. He says, you are Petra, which means small pebble. But he says, upon this rock, different word, Jesus is the rock. Upon this rock I will build my church. So this rock that we're seeing here is a shadow of Christ.
Yeah, turn to Matthew 16. Let's start in verse 13. And everybody turn there if you would. Matthew 16, and if you would just start verse 13, because this is very important verse. Because in Daniel chapter 2, it actually says that there's a stone or a rock that's cut from a mountain, not with human hands. I don't think he's making up words that don't mean anything when he says this. And Peter confesses Jesus as the Christ in Matthew chapter 16. In verse 13 it says, "Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, 'Who do people say that the Son of Man is?' And they said, 'Some say John the Baptist, so others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets.' He said to them, 'But who do you say that I am?' And Simon Peter replied, 'You are the Christ, the Son of the living God.' And Jesus answered him, 'Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter.'" And what's the word that he just called him there? Petra. And that means what? Stone, pebble, or something? And he says, and on this rock, which is a boulder, right? On this rock, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. This is talking about what we just read about in Daniel. Turn to John chapter 18 and verse 36. And Jesus answered, he said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from this world. My kingdom is not part of this world. My kingdom is not of this world. It's not a stone cut from this mountain by human hands." Mike?
How
if I even have that one on here, but I think I do. In Philippians 3 and verse 20, well, before that, we just read Daniel 2 and verse 44, where we said that this kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Because we showed that these other kingdoms, Babylon, the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, all these other empires were destroyed. But God's kingdom will never be destroyed. Ian?
Well, some people think that when Jesus comes back, that he's going to reign on this earth and then judge all the people. But God says, my kingdom is not of this world. Because, like Ephesians 6 is like, no flesh and blood can enter the kingdom of heaven.
Right. And
Can enter the kingdom of heaven, but our spiritual
if you would turn to Philippians 3 and verse 20, I think is what you're getting at. He says, our citizenship is in heaven, and from it we await a Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, we're coming into a time, and every year we face these same kind of things, but we live in a great country. I don't doubt that we have a great country, and we're blessed to have as many things as we have in this country. And I don't neglect the wonderful things that we have. And I'm not trying to say we don't be thankful. We should not be thankful for the wonderful things we have in this country. But I'm most thankful for being a citizen of heaven and a citizen of God's kingdom. And I owe my loyalties to Him. And that's the kingdom that I need to be most proud of and give my loyalties to. And not to bash my fellow citizens of this country because they're this party or that party. I need to give my loyalties to God and His kingdom. That's where my loyalties lie. I don't need to get caught up in one party or another party. I don't care if you're this or that. It doesn't really matter. Where I need to worry about is where my kingdom is with God, okay?
Say the interpretation that Nebuchadnezzar got, it might have helped him because he was the head of gold, everything after him was superior.
Yeah. You know, he was told here that he was the head of gold. Next week, we're actually going to read a story about he builds a statue of gold and he asks everybody to bow down and pray to it. So maybe it went to his head a little bit. I don't know. But, take that for what it's worth. But we need to remember that our citizenship lies in God's kingdom. And that's the kingdom that is never going to perish. And that's the kingdom that we should be most proud of. Did I see a hand over here? In Matthew chapter 21, turn there. Matthew chapter 21. I have it written on my paper, but I want to actually turn to it in my Bible, make sure I don't misquote it. Matthew 21, verse 42. And Mike, this is touching on that passage you were mentioning just a minute ago. But I just think this is very profound. Because here you have Jesus speaking. In Matthew chapter 21, verse 42, Jesus said to them, "Have you never read in the scriptures Does that sound a nice thing that he's saying there? Have you never read in the scriptures, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone? This was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore, I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people producing its fruits. And the one who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces. And when it falls on anyone, it will crush him. Do you know where that comes from? It comes from the Psalms. But do you know where it comes from in the Psalms? Do you know where it's alluding to? It's alluding to this. That's what he's talking about.
I was just thinking about what a moment in history in Daniel for this to be the time where God so clearly asserts that he's in charge of kingdoms. Because chapter 1 is Jerusalem falling, the best and the brightest being taken away, the temple is plundered. I mean, it just seems like God and his people you associate the two are at an all-time low. And quickly God is showing, no, I have full control. It's going to be this kingdom, and this one, and this one, and this one. But the point is, I'm setting up my kingdom. And if he can do it then and in that moment, then he is truly in control no matter which way the winds are blowing.
That's right. It's just, I think this is very serious matter that we're talking about. Maybe some of us haven't read Daniel in a while. Maybe some of us haven't read Daniel much at all. But this is very serious stuff. It's not just a children's story about a statue. This is very deep stuff. And then compare some of these latter days that we're talking about. Go to Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 1. Is that right? No, Isaiah chapter 2, sorry. Let's read Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. It shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and it shall be lifted up above the hills, and all the nations shall flow to it. And many peoples shall come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations, and shall decide disputes for many peoples, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. And compare that to, this is where I said we'd go back to it. Compare that to Daniel chapter 2 and verse 28. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries and has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head as you lay in bed are these. Those are the latter days. Those are the things that will happen in the latter days. This worldwide empire for all people isn't just a worldwide empire of Babylon and Persia and Greece and Rome or the United States of America or China or the Soviet Union. It's much bigger than that. It's God's kingdom. And it's a kingdom that's made up of all peoples. And it's a kingdom that we're all able to be a part of. And how do you become a member or a person who's able to be in that kingdom? Well, we're the people who have been entrusted with the message to spread that message, to get the people to be a part of that kingdom. How are we supposed to get people into this kingdom? Teach them the word. And how do we teach people the word? Well, there's various ways of doing that. We have to live a life of an example of the word. We have to show that we're honest about it. We have to spread the word. We can't be embarrassed to teach the word. We have to speak the word to people that we come in contact with, and we have to, Ian?
And being the example of what a Christian is.
That's right. And sometimes it is hard to do, but we need to do that. Ed?
Yeah, you mentioned this message. I mean, we're all Nebuchadnezzar. Every human is a Nebuchadnezzar that needs to hear that message. Because we live in our little bubble world and see the trees, but we don't see the forest. And this message is to look at the forest, big picture, where things, what's reality, what's real. You know, anybody studies history sees kingdoms come and go, dynasties come and go. Things that you, in your own world, think you're going to last forever, like this country's going to last forever. It's kind of a scary thought. Live in the reality of, and God's given us the message, and it's for every person in this world to get that message. Really what the real kingdom is about. And as it's mentioned, we need to be focused on that kingdom.
Right. And if we are all like Nebuchadnezzar by nature, maybe we need to be more like Daniel and share with our friends this idea of going to God in prayer and asking for help and giving him this idea of blessing God and asking him for wisdom and power to figure out how are we going to get through this.
Daniel, I mean, his example himself, I mean, even when he said, don't destroy all the wise men, but not going to save yourself, he said, hey,
Right.
we have the answer. Which was wisdom. He did, he said, don't destroy them. Here's the message.
Yeah.
It goes with the package, but it goes with God. God's messenger. He's a great messenger. Deliver this message to all of us.
Yeah. Thank you. So next week, chapter 3, and it's the next week is chapter 3, and that's the one where Nebuchadnezzar's golden image. So thank you.